Welcome back to Calvary Life. This is the podcast for the membership of Calvary Baptist Church and anybody else out there that's interested in local church life. And I'm Charles Uptain, the executive pastor.
Hey, I'm Paul Thompson.
And we're back today really to, debrief from our missions conference this past weekend. Just want to have a discussion with Paul about that and talk about the good of the weekend, and also really, I think we saw the weekend as a catalyst. Wouldn't you say? That's really what we want it to be?
Yeah, that's the aim. I mean, I guess there are a couple of primary aims, and really, if you're listening, and I don't want you to tune out just because you think this is just about one particular event. It's really about missions in general, and how a church addresses missions and promotes missions, supports missions, participates in missions, that sort of thing. So, I guess on the surface, at the least, we want to do is encourage our mission partners, let them know that they are loved and prayed for, and hear some faces to that and some voices to that. So I think they did. The feedback I got was they felt very encouraged, very appreciated. But I think it's just necessary to get our people connecting in a more personal way. It's great to show a video every now and then, and to keep up with missionaries via their emails, but it's a whole different thing when you can see them in person and talk to them and ask questions and interact with them. So encouraging to them, motivational to us, but we hope ultimately it will be a catalyst. Is this going to move anything forward? Because it wasn't just a fill in the blank sort of thing. It wasn't just a checking off the box. It was how do we get our church more missional, our people more involved in missions, that sort of thing. And if there's an event that we would pray and hope that maybe some people would be called out of to do something beyond what they're doing right now, this would be it.
Yeah, I think we as Southern Baptists, we take for granted our mission organizations. We're very proud of the cooperative program. We're very proud of how we cooperate together as churches to have missionaries all over the world. But because of that, I think sometimes we lose the closeness that we should feel as the local church towards missions. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a big trade-off. Of course, we're fans of the cooperative effort, and the main reason we do that is because we feel like we can do more together than we can do by ourselves. And so through the cooperative program, particularly through international missions, there's just an ideal, I think, collaboration of theological training and education, and then evaluation and screening, and then support and all those things. And of course, the benefit to an IMB missionary is that they don't have to raise their own support. They don't have to come back to the States on a regular basis trying to generate help, and they don't have to live with that uncertainty or that insecurity. But, like you're saying, the downside is if you don't know any of those missionaries personally, if you don't see them, hear from them, you can become pretty detached from it all, and it can seem just like no part of what you do, and really have no tangible effect on your church and its ministries. And
even worse than that, it even can become something that we just take for granted that it's done, and we don't have to do it.
Yeah. If we just keep giving, if we pay our part, and I know it seems like more and more churches are decreasing their giving to cooperative efforts, and I think that over time, I think that's the fruit of it. I don't feel connected to it. I don't know missionaries myself. I'm not seeing them come out of my church, that sort of thing. I think over time, it's going to result in a decline of financial support too. So I think it's a both and, having missionaries that we know, and even through the IMB, having a couple partners out there that we can say we know what they're doing, we know how to pray for them specifically.
Right.
We can contribute to things that directly support ministry projects that they're doing. That sort of thing is great.
Yeah, and we do want to partner with those the IMB towards if someone feels called from Calvary to go be a missionary. I mean, we would love for them to be an IMB missionary. Obviously, we'd love for them to be able to go through the process and the things that they've put in place for that. But we also realize that we as the church, we have a responsibility to train those that are called as well.
Right, and not everybody fits the criteria of IMB missionaries. I had a conversation with just somebody today that discussing missions. What about somebody at my age or with the level of education I have, that sort of thing? Well, probably won't fit the parameters. I don't know what all the current IMB parameters are, but what if there's some health limitations or some education limitations or even age, whatever it may be? There are plenty of other opportunities. That's not the end-all, be-all. So we can be involved in other things, other places.
Yeah. So thinking back to the weekend, when if someone was at our weekend at the conference and they really something was stirred in them to do more, what would you say is the next step? I mean, where would we want somebody to go? What would we want somebody to do if they are not sure what to do, or maybe they are really feeling God to call them to more of a mission effort than just what we do here at Calvary at a short term pace?
I think the first thing I would tell people is, why don't you enter into a very concentrated season of prayer for it? And I don't want people to feel discouraged by that, like we're pumping the brakes on them. But I would say, don't rush into this, because we want to be careful that we're not just stirring up somebody emotionally to do it, or even unintentionally manipulating someone with some feelings of guilt, that sort of thing. We want the motives to be pure, and really we want a clear sense of calling for that. So, what I would say to somebody on that is really just commit to a season of prayer about it, because if God is calling you to this, my take on the way God calls is He's not going to relent. This is not going to be just a momentary rush of emotion. It's going to be a pervasive, ongoing sense of calling. And another thing, I would say is explore some opportunities. Like you mentioned, beyond what we're doing, but some of those folks may be stirred and haven't done anything, haven't been anywhere.
Yeah.
Look to participate in something, and maybe the best first step they can do is understand, a right foundation of missions. This is one of the reasons we do a missions open class.
Yeah. Which actually starts right now.
Yeah. So, the timing's perfect. It's like coming up now, in a week and a half. Well,
yeah, on the 12th, right?
On the 12th.
Yeah, March the 12th.
On March 12th. So if you're thinking about missions, understand what it is that you're being called to. What is a healthy, not just a Calvary philosophy of missions. We're not teaching this as here's Calvary missions. What's a biblical view, a right biblical view of missions, and how should I be thinking? So I would say absolutely a starting point would be jump in there. But then, commit to a season of prayer. Don't rush into anything. And if you're married, have your spouse do the same thing. Make sure that you're on the same page with that, because I would discourage you from pursuing something that you do not have the buy-in and the support of your spouse. I believe that if you're married and this is what God is calling you to do, I believe in some form He's going to call both of you. You're both going to have a sense of that.
Yeah, and I think the church also. I don't know what I'm trying to get at here. I know what I'm trying to get at. I know how to say it is. The church also will affirm you. I think we need to be listening, have our ears open for those who are around us, and see if they are also affirming us towards something like that. I think God will use the church to help you in that.
Yeah, that's huge. We probably really need to explore the whole idea of where is the church in my sense of calling. Would I get the affirmation? I mean, if people's reaction to you talking about, I think I'm being called to missions, is what?
Yeah.
You? Seriously? Then maybe you need to evaluate yourself. It's interesting. One of the guys we had at our conference this weekend, Joe, who gave us our keynote, our main address on Sunday morning. He said some really good things. I would encourage any of you who are listening to the podcast to listen to Joe's message, because it's just straightforward. It's what? Oh, it's not out there.
Never mind.
We can't. All right, listen. I'm going to summarize it then. It's not out there. Okay. I just had a glitch in my system. All right, here's the essence of this. What is biblical missiology? And how God sends out the best people from churches, how God sends those people to plant and develop churches, make real disciples in those places, and in those places you raise up godly leaders called elders to lead. And there's just some good philosophy there. But anyway, what I was going to say is, one of the things that Joe and I were discussing afterwards was he was surprised when he got on the mission field how many missionaries weren't connected to local churches. They weren't churchmen. They weren't church people. And that just always seemed strange to him. How can you be doing this missionary work, but you're not part of a church? And the closest correlation I can come up with is, I said, man, I can remember when I was in seminary, the first go-round working on a master's degree in seminary, and surprised at the number of guys who didn't do anything in their local churches. They didn't serve. They didn't volunteer. Some weren't even very active, I think. And I thought, why would you pursue ministry if you're not already trying to do ministry? Most of the guys that I knew that I was close to, we were already serving on staff positions, and we were learning as you go, sort of. And I would say similar here. don't think, and maybe this is a Spurgeonism of sorts, it's not a quote, but don't expect to be an effective missionary somewhere else if you have no missional impulse and desire where you already are.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, we should be missional in life, as in, we should be evangelizing. We should be sharing the gospel. If that's not our normal thing, I agree. I don't think missionary is going to be where we're headed.
Yeah, that's probably not the right spot for you. But back to the idea of the church, not only us affirming, but we're trying to intentionally train people up so they're better equipped to do missions. So like if somebody asks, so why do you guys do those classes that are just so, I don't know, they seem academic or they're so theological, teaching things like biblical theology, systematic theology, Old Testament overview, New Testament overview? Well, one, we think every Christian needs to understand and know those things, and they'll better appreciate and be able to worship God. They'll better be able to understand their own Bibles, read them, apply them, do them. They'll have a better sense of the whole. But also, some people are going to go through those things and be really fed. They're going to want more and more and more, and they're going to be equipped to go do other things. Maybe they're going to be equipped to go be church planters, and they're going to need those foundations. Maybe they're going to be, this will be part of their equipping to be a missionary. We talked about this a little bit over the weekend with some of our folks, the role of the church and the role of seminaries.
Yeah.
One is not mutually exclusive of the other. We've changed our mindset about that in missionaries that we would send out from here. We don't want to just say, hey, I think that's great that you want to be a missionary. Now go find you a seminary and get trained. We can start training you up here. And then what you do in seminary is a partnership with, not something totally different from.
Yeah, we've had a conversation with Tommy being our missions pastor, just to look at him and say, hey, Tommy, you need to have a list of people that feel this special call. Maybe it's into vocational ministry or to missions, those kind of things, just so we as the church will know who to be praying for, who to be training up, how we can use these people in different ways so that we are being good stewards of the people God's given us as we look at what they could do for God in the kingdom when it comes to missions.
Yeah, that would be great if we had some sort of pipeline and we kind of had a sense where people were and how do we help them? How do we prepare them for that? So,
and let me say one more thing to that, Paul, about affirming. I think the church needs to look around too and see if you see someone that's in your life group who you feel is doing these things, who maybe you say, you know what, I don't know what God's called you to, but I think it's more than what you're doing. I think we need to be affirming to one another in that way and encouraging one another.
I think also as part of the whole for the church, we need to make sure that we see our people when they go out, that's a win, that's a victory, that our aim collectively, that our philosophical underpinnings here at Calvary and at the church that you're part of would not be just how do I build a bigger and better church? How do I gather in all the best people in this community and all the great talent and all the deep thinkers and all the theologians and all the evangelists and all the passionate worshipers and all the musicians? How do I collect all those to myself here? And we have just this great, we have everything and we have the best. Instead of saying, how can we send out our best people? That's a huge challenge because, and this is reality for us, Charles, moving forward, we're going to see some of our best people going out.
Yeah.
And so the challenge to the church is that a loss for you? I mean, I know you're going to miss them and the influence they had or the impact they made, but that's where the mentality's got to shift. Will you be fine if in 5 years, even 10 years from now, our Sunday morning attendance is about the same, maybe even a little bit less? It's about where we are, but at the same time, there have been 3, 4, 5 churches planted.
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, solid people sent out to the mission field or clusters of people sent out to help other church planters. Would that be a missional win? I think biblically we easily say absolutely. That's the Acts model. I'm going to be talking about that starting this Sunday night. Paul and the missional imperative of what pattern do we see in his missionary journeys? What was the church doing? What was normal? What was typical? What's foundational? Are there some lessons, besides just looking at like a history lesson, which is really fascinating on that score by itself, but is there something we can draw from that that's timeless?
Yeah. And what you're speaking there is really, I think, the elephant in the room when it comes to missions is sacrifice. Because the church has to, I remember we went to a missionary conference back in the fall, and one of the things that just stuck with me is one thing they would say is, everybody's on board of someone else's child to be a missionary. Not very much their child to be the missionary to go overseas. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's even the church itself being sacrificial, the church realizing this is
Oh, yeah.
the game of missions. I just finished a book about the missionary movement that was started in Scotland with Thomas Chalmers, and one of the main things that each of those college students who became a missionary faced was their family not wanting them to go because it just wasn't a part of their Christianity. To have that characteristic of I'm willing to sacrifice my child for the kingdom and not be because they weren't in the same culture we're in where we can fly all over the world and come back. They knew they weren't seeing their child again when he left to go to India.
Yeah, different deal.
And so, but that sacrifice, I think, really is a part of what we should see in missions. As this is who we are. We're people who God expects us to sacrifice, and I think the missionary effort is one of the biggest ways we can show that.
And you have to be careful with this response. We get this sometimes. Why are we putting so much effort around the world? Why are we putting money there? Why are we trying to get people to go there? We've got problems, needs all around us. I can remember, Charles, way back when we were much more active on a regular basis doing the same sort of mission projects in the Bronx. And our hope was that through that would be maybe a training field for how you could do missions other places, or would help people get their feet wet in missions, that sort of thing. But for some of our people, it actually had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Why would we go anywhere else? There are needs all around us. And then even worse than that, for some of those people, it says, why are we going to the Bronx?
Yeah.
We've got kids here. We've got people here. We've got the same needs here. Okay, so that's true, and that's absolutely true. But we have to be careful, and every individual has to be careful. That's not just a smokescreen for not doing anything. If you genuinely care about the people here, you will be doing something here. But we have to also see these are not competitive things, or mutually exclusive things. It's not an either or; it's a both and. Should we be doing things where we are? Yes. Should we be doing things there? Yes. Both and. And maybe the best analogy I could give to our church, and maybe this would resonate with you at your church if you're from another church, where we are in the world, and even where we are in this country, where we are even in the church world, religious world, we have a embarrassment of riches when it comes to, you think about, Charles, I'm not talking about just obvious. I'm talking about just the money that we have, that we live on a whole different level than most of the rest of the world. And so we have resources that most of, 99% of people in India would never know, that sort of thing. I'm not talking about just the obvious financial things. We have an embarrassment of riches in people who know the Bible.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of our time debating things. These intramural debates about some finer points, some minutia of theology sometimes. It gets a little bit maddening sometimes. Let's debate every single angle, every single distinction, difference, perspective, etc. We've got more people able right now in our own congregation who have the capacity to teach and lead, even to pastor churches, than, whole cities have in unreached areas,
right,
or virtually unreached areas. We've got it. We've got the resources. We've got the training. We've got the materials. We have the network, and we've got all those things. So what should we be doing with that? How can we be quartermaster, if that's a good term for us? How can we be a quartermaster to God's army around the rest of the world? I think we have that obligation. It's not enough just for us to accumulate all the knowledge we can get. What am I going to do with that? I was talking to one of our elders today and talking about just how God had spurred him on to thinking and reading and studying and learning and growing, and then just coming to a point of conviction. What are you doing this for? God, are you doing, maybe this is more than just for my own edification. Maybe you're stirring this up in me because you're preparing me to do something with this. I think that's a great line of thought.
Yeah. Let me switch gears to short-term missions, because this is, what the missions committee really spends a lot of the time doing. Tommy spends a lot of time doing is developing our mission partners around the world, and then equipping us as church members to go and help in some way, whatever way helps them best. And so those are short-term trips. So what's your thought as in for our congregation towards those short-term trips?
And that's a real good point that you made. I just want to make sure everybody's hearing that, because that is a philosophy shift for some people and for some churches about ministry and short-term missions. As much as possible, I won't say we're perfect in it, but we don't do mission projects for our own sake. So we're not just looking at things that we would want to do, things that we're good at or that we like, that sort of thing. We are really trying to do short-term mission projects that serve the missionary, the mission field. So that's one. If you wonder what's the criteria, how do we pick places, people, that sort of thing, it's, can we serve the mission there? And the other thing we try to do, I had this conversation with one of our new folks after the missions conference, is what you see here in this conference is the fruit of long-term relationships.
Right.
So the reason why we would invite a missionary in and give him free reign in a classroom to teach our people is because we know them. We spent lots of time with them. We partner with them, and this is not hit and run. This is long-term. This is long-term investment. Now I forgot what your question was.
Well, just about the short-term mission trips for our people. What's the main purpose in that?
Well, one then would be, we have gifts and skills and resources that would serve that mission. So that would be one. So, an example would be, we've got a trip coming up in the summer, and part of that trip has a medical component. Well, that's an obvious one. Do you have those abilities where you can serve people that way? Then go. Then you should do this. Other trips we'll take are very much about one-on-one evangelistic opportunities, gospel sharing, witnessing opportunities. Are you willing to do that in a cross-cultural place? Others are training and development. Again, that comes back to our people who love doctrine and theology and Bible study and things. You could be a real gift to someone in another place who doesn't have those things.
Yeah, and something that's important with that one that I have seen, especially when I've gone to Guatemala, is because you mentioned that we are so rich in the books and everything we have here, the theology that we already know, that even just it doesn't take an elder to be able to go do that training. I've seen our run-of-the-mill church member that's here on Sunday, here on Wednesday,
loves the Lord, knows the Word,
is bought into Calvary, bought into us, doing a great job training people in these other cultures who don't have that same level of understanding when it comes to the Bible.
Yeah, so I go to serve the need there, but also the effects of going, those can be significant. Some of those are obvious. You're going to go and you're going to be convicted of the need to be involved. So you're going to come back and you're going to be more generous. You're going to encourage other people to go. You're going to be more supportive. You're going to pray differently, that sort of thing. You're going to be involved better yourself. You're going to be motivated. You're going to help the church be more involved just by your presence there. But some other things will happen maybe unexpectedly on a different level. Like I would say the theological impacts of going can be very significant. Give you an example of what I mean. Like, what's your view of the church? I don't mean church little c, I mean capital C. If everything you think about regarding the people of God is only centered in what you've seen in the West or the U.S. or the Southeast U.S., then you're deprived of a richer picture of what God is doing in other places and how He's doing it, and how those people know Him and are worshiping Him and that sort of thing. Not in a non-biblical way. That's one of the beautiful things you see, the commonalities. In spite of culture and language, but you miss a sense of what God is doing in the church, and also it'll shift your theology and big picture things, like your soteriology. Okay, so what you believe about man's responsibility and God's sovereignty. You find that some of these debates that get a little tedious on our end, arguing these points of Reform versus non-Reform, Calvinist versus Arminian, et cetera, all those things kind of get washed away in an international context when you're faced with the reality of both. Like, for instance, you get to a city in India and there are 10 million people and they're virtually all lost. Okay, so what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Do you just write that off and say, well, God obviously doesn't want any of these people to be saved, that's why they're all lost? Well, that would be a wrong view. That would be an extreme view on one side. It's just not healthy, not biblical. Or on the other hand, you leave there with all this guilt of it's all my responsibility. That wouldn't be biblical either. Yeah. You have to go with the sense of it's not just Romans 8 or Romans 9, it's Romans 10. How are they going to know unless someone tells them? So how do we make sure these people are being told? But at the same time, how are we trusting that God will, through His sovereignty, ensure the effectiveness of the telling. And you're left there with this, with some things that are just unanswerable, but you're not debating them anymore. You're just saying, okay, God, all right, how are you going to use me? How are you going to use me to be obedient? And I think it affects people in like their eschatology too. So much of our modern eschatology, our view of the end times in America, is so American centric. Like, we just look at what's happening in our own political world, our own social world, and I think there's this hope now in America that things are all getting better. In a sense, in a very real sense, a lot of political things I think are, but shape your eschatology not just based on what you see happening in the church in America. It might be easier now for the next several years to be a publicly outspoken Christian in America, but it's only getting harder in most of Africa. It's only getting harder in the Middle East. It's only getting harder in the Far East. So it just helps shape, okay, what's God doing in the whole world, and then it ties me to that, and you begin to realize, as much as I love my own country, my own people, and my own neighbors, and that sort of thing, we're citizens of a global kingdom. And so I don't know. I don't want to sound arrogant because I've been to these places and seen them. I'm just saying you just start to think a little bit differently about what am I here for? What's the role of the church? What's God doing in the world? And I think ultimately what I would say for the vast majority of people who go on these short-term trips, it stirs you to want to be part of that. I just want to be part of what God's doing. So I think that changes the essence of it for most people.
Yeah, which really goes back to the New Testament. It's participation. It's what our title of the weekend was. It's being partners with the gospel, and so that's what we really get to do when we're in those other areas and see that and feel it, and you're a part of it. God's using you as a part of His army, which is an awesome feeling to realize that He would do that for us. A couple of quick hitters about short-term missions, because we get these questions, and you may be thinking, well, I can't go on this trip, or and so I just want to, I guess, nail these down so you can kind of see what our mindset is. We try to do these trips for each of these cultures or each place we're going kind of in the same frame every year. So maybe you need a lot of time for like work to get off. Well, you should know that, we're going to go to Guatemala near the end of February, 1st of March. We're going to go October, November. And then every year we kind of do that same thing. Kenya, it's been the summer, late June, early July kind of trip. These things kind of have a cycle. So if you can't go this year because the 2025 is already booked, or you don't have vacation or whatever, expect the same kind of trips, because these are long-term trips that we do to these places. And so, try to just see and talk to Tommy. There may be a week you need, and we are kind of flexible with some of these things. I was talking to one of our missionaries while he was here, and he was like, I don't care if it's the first week, second week, or third week, just let me know what fits the church best. So
if we've got people to go, I think we can get you there.
Yeah, so don't let the constraints of the schedule really keep you from really, getting involved in one of those. And one other thing I'd say with that is also don't allow the idea that I can't afford it to make it where you can't go. Number one, we want to help you understand how to fundraise, how to get your people around you, your family, your neighbors to pray for you and help sponsor you. But if that doesn't work, then the church, the missions committee has scholarships available that you can apply for. And so we want to make it where everyone who wants to go feels God is leading them to go on a trip to be able to go. And so don't let that be your the thing that hinders you from going. Also, is the financial component of it.
And our trips are tiered to a degree too. Not everything requires 2 weeks off or 12 days away to go to another continent.
Right.
We have more localized mission opportunities and projects. Sometimes a weekend. It may be something as short as 3 or 4 days in New York, or 3 or 4 days in New Orleans. It may be a long weekend in Guatemala, which sounds much farther away, but really it's as accessible as flying to New York to get on a plane and go. And so we have these shorter term, then we have some longer term kind of things, but there are different tiers. And so I think some of these projects really lend themselves to you taking your family with you, and letting them be exposed to it, letting them find roles in places like, we're doing some things in Kenya this summer that students can certainly be a good part of that, working with children, interacting with other people their own age, that sort of thing. New Orleans for sure, we do some things there, probably New York as well. So, there's some opportunities for that. If the question is you want to go, but you're not really sure where, it's not a pat answer, but it is an answer I would say is, really commit that to prayer. And I would say if you can sort of triage your I guess the reasons why, what you're picking between, the priorities there, I would say priority 1, where is there a great need? Priority 2, or response to priority 1, do I have anything that can meet that need?
Yeah.
And then just see if you can, go. As far as going and who you go with, it really just depends. If you can stir up your D group to go on a trip together, that could be an awesome experience for people that that you've been in the trenches with, praying together and studying Scripture together and growing together. You could do a project together. A whole life group could do an effective project together. A family can do a project either just as a family or with other people. So there are just a lot of opportunities there.
And one concrete step you could definitely take if you're thinking about anything overseas is go get your passport. Yeah. If you don't have a passport, don't let that be the last thing you do, because it can take up to 6 to 8 weeks to get that done. So just while it's hot on your mind, go ahead and apply for that passport and have that ready for then you to be able to go on a lot more trips.
That may be the first response to people at the missions conference that were there that feel like, man, I think I want to do something. Okay, do this. So now at least you're ready. And that's going to take a little while. It takes a little time for you to get it back. So we, and we're always looking at how do we create more opportunities? How do we do this in an efficient way? We try to do these where they're not terribly expensive. It's actual cost. So just know that if you look at a mission trip and you say, wow, this is expensive, it is the cost of going there, that sort of thing. But again, like you said, don't let that be the decisive factor. We can help with that sort of thing. We can help raise funds to that. We can help facilitate that.
Yeah, and maybe you can't go. Maybe at this time of your life, maybe you have 12 small kids and nobody to watch them, and so you can't go on a trip right now. Then there are things you can do too. So what would you say to that member who just, this is not a seasonal life for them to be able to have time? They don't have time off from work or whatever reasons that are real reasons. What would you say they can do to be a part of what we're doing for
The first
missions?
answer, I think, is the most obvious, maybe the one people don't want to hear as much, but it is the reality. Financial support is key. That's part of us stewarding the resources God has given us well. That's part of being good quartermasters. And truly, some of the projects that are presented to us, what they need most is resources. And it's more effective and more efficient if we can provide the financial means for other people to do it rather than us. An example might be, and we had this experience before. I've used this as an illustration. The trip that we took, we took a trip early on. This maybe a dozen years ago. I took a trip from here. We went to Cuba, and we did some good work in terms of evangelism, preaching, and teaching. But most of our work there, because the government requires you to have a physical project, most of our work there was digging ditches. Truly, we were digging ditches to lay PVC pipe for this church. None of us are above digging ditches. That's not the point at all. Any of us should be willing to dig ditches for the kingdom of God. The point is, we took people who had skills. There were 3 or 4 medical doctors on the team. That wasn't the best use of their skills. It wasn't the most efficient use of their time. It wasn't the best use of our own resources. So in that sense, stewardship is an issue. And in reality, in hindsight, as we got there, we're digging all these ditches. Well, the church didn't have windows. The church needed windows. And so we're talking to the pastor about all your needs. Well, I really need to get these windows in. What would that cost? It didn't take long for us to do the math that the money that we spent for all of us to come over there and dig ditches, we could have been better served to take that money, send it to him in resources.
Yeah.
He could have had the ditches dug by local people who needed work, had the windows put in, and his church would be set. And we still could have sent 1 or 2 people over there that would just go to preach or teach.
Right.
That's
right.
So sometimes it's just resources. Like this week in missions conference, we asked people, will you donate for Bibles? Because what we're hearing everywhere is we need Bibles. We need Bibles in their languages, or we need Bibles in this community. Whether it's in Kenya and they're going out into the villages, people are asking for Bibles, or India, people want Bibles in their own languages. So you want to do something concrete? Donate to the fund that's going to put Bibles in their hands. 100% of it's going to go to Bibles.
And even with that, we're doing it a smarter way. We could try to buy all the Bibles here
and ship them, or
which
take
would
them.
Cost an enormous amount. Places we couldn't even get them shipped to, versus us sending the money and letting our mission partners who have a track record of taking good care of things like that and letting them purchase the Bibles there.
Then find local printers, and or some of them can print them themselves. But yeah, it's trying to be efficient and good stewards of it. So that's not an illegitimate way. That's a very legitimate way of supporting missions. But also in a very concrete way. Again, these are going to sound generic, Charles, but if people will take them to heart and do it, to really commit yourself to praying for a missionary.
Yeah.
And do it in a way where you're actually in touch with them, communicating with them. Because to a person, every missionary that we're involved with, we have contact with them via email. So at the very least, a weekly correspondence of email, even if brief, that I'm praying for you, and then a return, how can I pray for you, would be huge for them.
Yeah.
Those folks are just looking for a network of support, prayer support. So you can certainly do that. And then a third, it kind of circles back to some money. Do the same thing for some of our own missionaries. If you can't go, maybe you can sponsor someone who can, that you know, that you have confidence in, that you would feel really good about seeing them go.
Right.
And do the same thing for them. Help sponsor them financially, or commit, I'm going to pray for you the whole time that you're there. I'm going to pray for you every day while you're there. Those are all some things that you can do to be part of it. That really, really do make a difference. And when we get that, not everybody can go physically, or for whatever reasons, financially, or different factors, family, stage of life, that kind of thing. But you still can be part of the whole. You can be part of the whole process.
Yeah, and two other things I'm thinking about things we did this weekend. We also have the sponsorship to the orphans that. There's still cards available for that. So if you're here Sunday and go to the missions area, and which is in front of the fellowship center at that big wall, and we'll have cards there that you can pick up and sponsor children. Or another thing from that is we had little prayer books. We had prayer journals with each one of a kind of a story of each of our missionaries. That's a great tool to be able to pray for them specifically, because there's specific needs in there, and it lets you know who our missionaries are, and faces and names and kids and all those kind of things. So those are two great tools from the weekend. If you weren't able to be here, or with all the busyness of it, didn't pick those things up, see those at the missions area.
A cool thing about those cards too is if our people do that, this is personal. Like you could write that girl or boy at the orphanage that you sponsor. You could write them a letter, and we'll hand deliver it. When we go over there, or Moses can send you a picture, or even a little video of them talking. I mean, again, I'm not comparing it to other ways that there's orphan support or monthly support in other organizations. I'm just saying this one is personal to us. These are the kids in the orphanage that we played a significant role in building, coming to fruition. These are the kids that are part of a ministry that we've been involved with before an orphanage existed there. Right. So, I mean, it is personal to us.
Yeah, every day those children wear clothes that we supplied. I mean, not in generic ways, as in, well, these are some things that we bought here in Dothan and sent, and we know they wear them every day because that's what
they're sleeping on beds that you provided for them.
Yeah.
They're in a room that is there because of the generosity of our people. So, no, I think it's just personal. Charles, we talked about a while back, man, how's he going to sustain this over the long term? It's one thing getting a building built. That's a one-time cost, even if it's huge. It's one thing doing that, but how do you sustain the cost of this and the care of this, their medical care, their food care, their clothing care? It's a task, and it has to continue. And, here's the thing, too. Everybody has to prayerfully consider that. You can't give to everything. You can't go everywhere. You can't sponsor everyone. So you have to pray carefully about that and go where the Lord's leading. Like one of the questions asked of us, well, how would I know where to go? I don't know the answer to that exactly. And I said, find out where the need is and try to match that with your own abilities and gifts. But at the same time, sometimes God just directs. Our long-running partnership with a person in South Asia right now, one of our mission partners, who we can talk about in our services, I won't talk about here specifically, but how did we get in this relationship with him? Well, it just came through prayer, and somehow God began to focus the world down into one particular area and one particular unreached people group, and now I think again, I credit him and his family for the work they're doing there and their team, but God is using us in a way there too, to support and encourage that. So don't underestimate the power of God through prayer, that God responding to. He'll point you in the right direction. If you're willing to go, he'll point you there.
Yeah.
So I guess what we want to affirm for our people is we believe that God's calling the church to send out missionaries, not missionaries just at random. Seminaries don't do that. Organizations don't do that. That has to come from churches. And so that needs to happen to us. We want to train those people up too. We want to be part of that, not just encouraging you, sustaining you, supporting you while you're there, but getting you ready to go.
Yeah. So another prayer request for our people is to pray that people will answer the call that God's placing on their heart from Calvary to go do these mission things.
Yeah. Pray that God, that's pretty biblical, right? Pray that the Lord will send out laborers into his harvest. And then we do want long-term sustainable ministries. We want to see, and I'm going to be preaching about this in a few weeks, we want to see good churches happen. We want to see disciples being made, churches happening that reproduce themselves. So the aim is through the church, God would expand the church, build churches, and it would continue. So that's the aim. That's the prayer. If you do have interest, you want to go, you want to talk to somebody about going, you can call any of us. I mean, we'd love to start funneling you that way and encouraging that way. And that's the last thing I would say on that part, Charles, is if you haven't heard this already through everything that we said, the church will support you in this.
Right.
We're not saying, hey, that's great, you have at it, let us know how it goes. We want to be part of this with you. We will support and encourage you to do this. And we take that seriously, I mean, it's not all about just financial support, but we will put our money where our mouth is on that. We will leverage resources and things to support people in missions.
Yeah, and it is a part of who we are at Calvary. I'm very thankful that our church has a DNA that is about missions, that we do see the importance of this, and we do, as you say, put our money where our mouth is with our giving to missions in the different ways throughout the year. I mean, this church is so generous to our partners and so generous in even what we give to the mission efforts, ongoing and also special projects. Even like this past, the Bible thing. I mean, we almost have $30,000 that was given
just like that, yeah.
To that cause over a weekend. When that's the heart of our people, and so very thankful for that.
And that's where I would brag on Calvary on that. As long as you've been at Calvary, as long as anybody in the church, our longest term members, I mean, I think everybody would say that has been the heart of the church for as long as anyone can remember. The church wants to do missions, is generous towards missions, and just wants to know how we can do it the best that we can, and for God to use us.
Yeah. Well, I'll close with this. Very, very thankful for Tommy Perry. He didn't give himself any accolades on the weekend, but I will. I think he did a great job of putting that together, getting all the logistics, which is, it's like herding cats when you've got so many different parts. But he did such a good job, and very thankful for him and his ministry, his heart towards missions that's grown to that. Tommy didn't come here as the missions pastor, but he really has
morphing.
Yeah, he's grown into that position to love missions and be our advocate all over the world and partnerships. So very thankful for him, and then the whole committee, just everybody that came. Thank you for being a part of it.
The host homes.
Yeah, great crowd on Saturday, great crowds on Sunday in both services and in life group, and all the host homes that helped take care of our missionaries. Thank you for making them feel at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that'll do it. We'll wrap up our Calvary Life podcast, and we'll see you again. Remember, we are for God, for Dothan, and for the world.